Today I want to report to you on the very potent backstage lobby against schools. A lobby which is doing its best to block the school construction bill proposed by President Eisenhower. Now, as a longtime newspaper observer in Washington, I have watched develop an unfortunate situation whereby Congress more and more bows to the will of the lobbies. If a powerful lobby is behind a bill, it passes. If a powerful lobby tries to block a bill, it doesn't pass. For instance, the chief reason the highway bill breezed through Congress, even though it'll cost billions of dollars, was because Dave Beck, head of the Teamsters, plus the powerful trucking lobby were behind it. The steamship lines get millions in subsidies because the steamship lobby is powerful. And the powerful airline lobby gets money for airports, beacon lights, and weather stations. So I want to report to you on the lobby that is working against the children of the nation. What I report in just a minute will make certain people in high places very angry, but it will be the truth. If you call the roll of those who consider themselves most opposed to communism in this country, I suppose the people who claim to be at the head of the list would be the National Association of Manufacturers, the Farm Bureau, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Yet they happen to be in the vanguard of those helping Russia most in this country right now by leading the lobby against schools. These gentlemen, directors of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, are probably doing more to help Russia than some of our extreme left-wingers. Now, they won't like it when I say that. But let me give you the facts, and then you decide for yourself. Let's take a look at what Russia's doing in the field of public education, the same type of education which the U.S. Chamber is trying to slow up by killing the Eisenhower school bill. These figures were taken from the U.S. Bureau of Education and the National Education Association. They show that whereas under the Tsar, 75% of the Russian people could not read or write, today, as many Russians can read and write as Americans. The figures also show that the communists have pushed education more than any other program outside of military defense. Russian schools and universities are crowded, and students taking higher courses are even paid to go to school. Now, don't misunderstand me. Russia is not yet ahead of the United States when it comes to school buildings. We are still ahead, but she's pushing ahead so rapidly that if she continues her present pace and we continue our present slow pace, then Russia will soon be ahead. Here, for instance, are some of Russia's new school buildings. This is secondary school number 2 in Nikolaev, completed about 3 years ago. Here is school number 21 in Minsk, now about 6 years old. In these schools in the big cities, Russia has started a new system of compulsory high school education, definitely ahead of ours. We require compulsory education only through about the 8th grade, but Russia is requiring 3 years of high school, which is 2 years more than is required in most of our states. Compulsory high school education has already been started in schools like this in Moscow. It has not been started yet in rural schools or smaller cities. However, even in smaller cities, schools like this have been built all over Russia. This is one in the Krasnodarsk area. 34 new schoolhouses were opened in this area in 1 year. Now let's look at some of the universities. This is the State University of Kazan, in what was once called Turkestan, down in the far south. This is the Abai State University in the Republic of Kazakh, also in old Turkestan. About 3,000 students attend this university, which is not as big as one of our average state universities. Now, the modern building of which Russia is most proud, however, is the new main building of Moscow University. It cost $150 million, which is more than some American colleges spend on their entire campus. The wings are 18 stories high. The center, 35 stories high, compares with the New York skyscraper. Now, that gives you some idea of what the Russians are doing. Some people would doubtless claim that I'm spreading Russian propaganda. But these are facts. And the only way you keep ahead of a rival nation is by knowing the facts and meeting the facts. Today there are 35 million people registered in Russian primary and high schools. I think that figure is padded a bit because it includes night courses. The Russians also claim that 60 million people are studying if you include adult classes and correspondence courses. But going above the high schools to the university level, Russia claims to have 4,300,000 students enrolled. This, however, includes technical and manual training schools, so the real figure probably is not as great as ours. We have 3 million students definitely enrolled in colleges and universities. However, here is probably the most important aspect of Russian education. It is concentrated so heavily on technical training that already it's turning out more engineers than we are, about twice as many. Now here's another disturbing development. While Russia is concentrating on physics and science, the United States last year graduated only 228 teachers of physics to teach physics in 27,000 American high schools. It's the physicists who are needed most to work on atomic energy, yet we graduated only 228 teachers. Incidentally, it's the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and companies associated with it which need technicians and engineers most. Now here's some figures that will interest the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. In 1900, 56% of American high school students studied algebra. In 1953, 50 years later, that dropped to one-half, only 25%. In 1900, 19% of American high school students studied physics. 50 years later, in 1953, that had dropped by three-quarters, and 4% study physics today. The younger generation in America seems to have gone in for soft, snap courses. Meanwhile, in Russia, all the emphasis is on science. Laboratories are well-equipped. Scientific study doesn't wait for the colleges. It begins in high school. 40% of the school curriculum is devoted to science and mathematics, with 6 years of foreign language, usually English, to help Russian engineers learn what American engineers are doing. And judging by the reports of our own intelligence experts, Russia is keeping abreast or ahead of us in the use of weapons and the development of the weapons of war that mean life or death to a nation. In a minute, I'll report what the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is doing. Now, I'm sure the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Farm Bureau, the NAM don't really mean to be in a position of helping Russia by opposing schools. Nevertheless, John S. Coleman, president of Burroughs Adding Machine, until recently president of the U.S. Chamber, authorized a very effective job of trying to kill the school bill. His organization has simply bombarded the nation with statements against aid to education. The Chamber's argument is that we need to cut taxes, and that the state should build schools. States, of course, tax the lower brackets more proportionally than the federal government does. The federal government puts more of a tax burden on the wealthy brackets. So the U.S. Chamber would rather see the states build schools. The new president of the U.S. Chamber is Philip Talbot, head of the Woodward and Lothrop department store in Washington. Now, the Chamber of Commerce was all in favor of the federal highway bill, which will spend at the rate of over $2 billion a year and cost 4 times as much as the school bill. It'll give the states $2 of your and my money for every $1 of state money, whereas the school bill would cost us, the federal government, only $1 for every dollar from the state. However, the U.S. Chamber, with Dave Beck and the big trucking lobby, put highways ahead of schools, trucks and cars ahead of children. However, I'm glad to report that there is by no means unanimity of opinion among businessmen about education. Not all share the views of the U.S. Chamber. Eric Johnston, who is president of the U.S. Chamber longer than any other man in history, has stated, "I have been disturbed and astonished at the short-sightedness and lack of understanding of this program by my business colleagues." He called education an investment in people. Another businessman, Marion Folsom, former head of Eastman Kodak, who was director of the U.S. Chamber for 6 years and is now Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare under Eisenhower, also took strong issue with his old business friends. He showed how Chamber of Commerce figures on schools were distorted, misleading, erroneous. But while the U.S. Chamber was lobbying with congressmen urging that they block money for schools, 3 schools in North Carolina caught on fire. In one at Flat Rock, 400 pupils barely managed to escape the outmoded fire trap in which they were studying. One crippled boy who couldn't get out was burned to death. The teacher who went back to rescue some of the children died of burns. Just 2 days before that fire, Thomas A. Ballantyne of Louisville, Kentucky, chairman of the U.S. Chamber's Committee on Education, had testified before the House Committee on Education against new schools. Such proposals as H.R. 1, the Kelly Bill for new schools, he said, seems to us the most dangerous of all federal aid proposals. Our investigation," he continued, "indicates that no critical national shortage in classrooms has been or can be demonstrated to exist. The pessimistic outlook reported was more the result of wishful thinking on the part of the local school administrators than of any valid evidence of classroom conditions. Certainly these figures do not demonstrate or identify state conditions that would add up to a national emergency," unquote. So testified the spokesman for the U.S. Chamber 2 days before 3 schoolhouses burned in North Carolina, killing 1 boy and 1 heroic teacher. I'll have a suggestion in just a minute. As I said a minute ago, the powerful lobbies get what they want out of Congress. The people with no lobbies behind them, the school children, the teachers, usually don't. However, Congress does listen to the voice of the people if that voice is expressed loudly enough. If you want better education, if you want us to keep ahead of Russia, if you want the capitalist world to continue to take the lead in education, there's one thing you can do. Let your congressman know how you feel. Let him know vigorously, and let him know right away.